In today's episode, we're looking at the all-time best fantasy teams for three squads: the Portland Trail Blazers, the Sacramento Kings, and the San Antonio Spurs. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. As I said, we are getting towards the end of these all-time fantasy basketball teams. This is the last, or three of the last 6 teams, and then we'll go through it and see how all these squads match up to see which franchise has the best overall fantasy team since the 79-80 season. We're looking at 3 squads here, and we're going to start off with the Portland Trail Blazers and their all-time fantasy squad. At point guard, it is Damian Lillard. Last season's Damian Lillard, the 18-19 season, where Lillard was the seventh ranked player in that year. He was the 6th ranked player back in 14-15, but last year was actually a stronger year for Lillard, where he averaged 26 points with 7 assists, almost 3 triples. He got over 1.1 steals and shot a whopping 91% from the line. His free throw numbers are outstanding, have always been outstanding, but the volume and that percentage, 91% for the last 2 years, has been a real key in his fantasy value. So he is the all-time Blazers starting point guard on their fantasy squad. Next to him, nobody would be surprised that it is Clyde Drexler. Which season is it? It's the 87-88 year for Clyde. He was the 5th ranked player in that year, and that 5th ranked season from Drexler was actually better than Lillard's 18-19 season. He averaged 27, 6.5, and 6 with a massive 2.5 steals. Now, when you think of Clyde Drexler, when I think of Clyde Drexler, I think of Clyde the Glide. I think of dunks. I think of scoring. I don't think of a bloke who had over 2.5 steals or over 2.2 steals for 5 consecutive seasons. A guy that was an absolute beast, which was his best fantasy category, amazingly. He also was a 50% shooter. Not as good from the line as you would expect. He's not like a 90% Lillard guy hovering around those high 70s, low 80s in terms of free throw percentage, but just absolute monster steal numbers from Clyde Drexler. At small forward, it is Kiki Vanderway, the 86-87 version of Vanderway. He was the 11th ranked player in that season. He had better years as a member of the Denver Nuggets, but this was his best season as a member of the Portland Trail Blazers. 38 minutes and 27 points. He was just really a massive scorer and a great shooter. 52% from the field, 89% from the line. He also was a massive 48% from 3, albeit on limited attempts. And weirdly, the year before that, he was at 13% from 3 on an even smaller amount of attempts somehow. I don't think he hit 1 3 the year before that, and he then hit 39 in this season. But that percentage was really strong. A dynamic scorer and really strong shooter, even though everything else from Vanderway left quite a bit to be desired. Our starting power forward is Rasheed Wallace, the that doesn't sound right. The 2000-2001 version of Rasheed Wallace. He was the 14th ranked player in that season, just really contributing right across the board. 19 and 8, 1.2 steals, 1.8 blocks, 50 and 77 is his percentages, 0.7 threes. He would also go on to be a 1.5 threes per game guy. Actually, the season immediately after this one, he would up his 3-point volume and be really strong right across the board. But his overall field goal percentage in this one being better than those past seasons really gets him the nod here to be, or this season for him to be the nod as the starting power forward. Now, probably cheated a little bit by putting Rasheed at power forward and putting LaMarcus Aldridge at center, but I wanted to put those guys in those positions because, just giving a little bit more strength overall to this Blazers squad. So LaMarcus Aldridge, the 10-11 version of Aldridge, despite what he thinks he is better as a center versus being a power forward. 10-11, he was the 14th ranked player in fantasy. He averaged 22 and 9. He didn't hit threes. He still doesn't hit threes. He didn't really block shots, and he still doesn't at a high rate. 1.2. He had a steal a game, but it's really that elite efficiency from Aldridge along with the high scoring. 22 points per game on 50% shooting and 79% from the free throw line. He's a consistent second, third round fantasy guy and has been for many, many seasons. At some point, a drop-off is going to come, but just a remarkably consistent career for LaMarcus Aldridge so far. On the bench, backup point guard Terry Porter, 90-91 season for Porter. He was the 9th ranked player there. 17 points, but 8 assists and 2 steals, plus really strong shooting numbers from Porter. He shot 42% from 3 on decent volume in the 90-91 season, so really strong stuff from Porter there. And then next to him in that backup backcourt is CJ McCollum, the 16-17 season from CJ, where he was the 18th ranked player. His best scoring year, averaging 23 points on 48% shooting and 91% from the line. And really, that's been the reason why we've seen a decline in McCollum, is that instead of being 91% from the line, he's at 82% from the line. Instead of being 48 from the field, he's down at 44 or 45%. And those two things, that makes a difference when you're looking at overall fantasy production. And that's why McCollum has gone from a guy who was the 18th ranked player 2 years ago to being the 70th ranked player last season. At small forward, it is Nicholas Batum, who in that 13-14 season was really good. He was the 19th ranked player. Assists, rebounds, steals, blocks, good percentages, hit threes, scored a little bit. He was never outstanding in one category, but provided production right across the fantasy spectrum, scoring, assists, rebounds, threes, everything. And I've already said that. Just did everything. And that's why Nick Batum is in there. We forget about Nick Batum being a really strong fantasy guy after the last couple of nonsense seasons that he's put up. Your backup power forward is Zach Randolph, 03-04. That was Randolph's 3rd season in the league, and he was the 25th ranked player. And it's actually not far off his best season. His best season, he was ranked 21st in his first year in Memphis. For this season, he averaged 20 and 11, and in true Zach Randolph style, did absolutely nothing else. Didn't hit threes, didn't get steals, didn't block shots, was okay at percentages, but it was just big rebound numbers and good scoring numbers, and that's why he was never able to ascend to being an elite fantasy guy, just a solid mid-round player. Your backup center is Arvydas Sabonis, the 97-98 version of Sabonis, where he was 33 years of age. He was the 27th ranked player, averaging 16 and 10, 3 assists, 1.1 blocks, great percentage numbers. You'd think he would have been able to crack the top 15 if he was over in the NBA in his prime, but he only came over at age 31 and still put up 5 top 70 seasons despite coming over at age 31. That is how good he was. Your last 3 rotation guys, Kenny Anderson, who only had the 1 season in Portland, but that 1 year he qualified and was the 26th ranked player in that season, averaging 17 and 7 with 2 steals. Rod Strickland comes in the 93-94 season. Strickland was the 19th ranked player there. He would have strong seasons for the Wizards/Bullets as well, but Strickland is the other player. And then Jim Paxson, not Johnny Paxson, Jim Paxson gets the last spot. The 84 season for Paxson. He was the 20th ranked player there, averaging 21 points per game. Only shot 29% from 3, but big scoring from Jimmy Paxson with 84% from the free throw line. So that is your all-time Portland Trailblazers team. You guys, when you're looking to try and save money, a great way of doing that is maybe learning to fix your own car. Or even if you don't want to learn to fix your own car, getting the parts at a much cheaper price. Instead of going into your auto store and you got to sit there while the bloke looks up which part he needs and then has to order it, why don't you do it yourself? And you can do it yourself by going to rockauto.com. Rockauto.com is a family-owned business that has been serving customers for the last 20 years online. What they are, it's a place where you can go cut out that middleman from your local auto repair service store and order those parts yourself and save yourself 30, 50, even up to 100% on genuine parts. RockAuto.com has everything from engine control modules and brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpets. So go to RockAuto.com, find the part you need, get it at a cheaper price, and when they ask you where did you come from, in that box, just write in Locked On so they know that you came from us. Right, the next squad we're going to look at is the Sacramento Kings. Started off this time period as the Kansas City Kings because we are going back to the 79-80 season. The starting point guard for this Kings squad is Mike Bibby. Yes, Mike Bibby, we know time in Vancouver, but also he was great in Sacramento. He looks like a cartoon character now, but the 03-04 version of Bibby, he was the 9th ranked player in that season. He averaged 18 and 5 with 82% from the line. So just really strong. Not completely elite in these categories, but strong enough to be a second round guy in 03-04. Next to him, this guy's already been on a team, and that is Mitch Richmond. We saw him on the all-time Golden State Warriors team. Now the 96-97 version of Richmond, which was his best ever season in the NBA. He was the 6th ranked player. He averaged 26 points with 2.5 threes and shot 86 from the line. 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.5 steals, but just an elite scorer, a really strong shooter, 43% from 3 in this season as well. For Mitch Richmond to find himself placed on this all-time Kings team. Next to him, Peja Stojakovic. He was also on the all-time Pelicans team, but this 03-04 season of Stojakovic was ridiculous. He was the 2nd best player in fantasy this season. He played 40 minutes a night, 24 points, hit 3 threes, but also 93% from the free throw line on 5 attempts per game. He got 6 rebounds. He shot 43% from 3, 48% overall. So elite threes, elite scoring, elite free throws, great field goal percentage. Got you some steals as well. An absolutely amazing season from Pedro, who had 5 consecutive top 30 seasons, but this was the creme de la creme, the 2nd overall player in 03-04. Next to him, speaking of studs, Chris Webber, the 2000 version of Webber. He was the 3rd ranked player in that season. He averaged 24.5 points, 11 rebounds, almost 5 assists, 1.6 steals, 1.7 blocks, 48% from the field. That's steals and blocks and points and rebounds combo from Webber. Throw in good assist numbers made him an absolutely elite fantasy player who on a per game basis was a top 10 player for 7 consecutive seasons before injuries started to have an impact on his overall career. But Webber, absolutely fantastic. And the guy next to him, pretty bloody good as well. The 13-14 season of DeMarcus Cousins. Now, he was only the 16th ranked player that year on totals basis because he missed some games, but he averaged 23 and 12. He did have a better season as a member of the Pelicans before he tore his Achilles, but this was 23 and 12, 3 assists, 1.5 steals, 1.3 blocks. This was before he started hitting threes in volume, and before he really started to become a hub on offense in terms of passing. So in that season in New Orleans, he was able to give you 2 threes a game, over 5 assists per game. He hadn't developed that yet for Sacramento, but this is still the best season that he had as a member of the Kings from a totals basis. His year after this, his 14-15, was better on a per game basis, but he only played 59 games, so that's why that year didn't get the nod, and Cousins could have been significantly better overall. He didn't miss as much time that he did, and now it appears his career is absolutely hanging by a thread after the Achilles and then the ACL tear. Backup point guard, Larry Drew, the original. This is Drew from the 82-83 season where he was the 23rd ranked player. 20 points per game, Drew averaged in this season with over 8 assists and 1.7 steals. So a pretty typical sort of number for a point guard back in the early 80s. Good scoring, good assists, good steals with good percentages. That's sort of what everyone did back in that point. Next to him, Reggie Theus, 82-83 version for, 85-86 version for Theus. He appeared on the Chicago Bulls team in the 82-83 season. This is him in 85-86 where he was the 15th ranked player. He averaged 18 points with almost 10 assists per game. Back with the Bulls, he was like a 5 assists per game guy. Came across to the Kings and then pushed it up to 8 and 10 assists per game. Great assist numbers, great percentages, good free throw numbers. Didn't really hit many threes, but strong assists from Theus to make him an excellent fantasy guy. Dougie Christie, your backup small forward here. He's the 2000-2001 season for Christie. He was the 29th ranked player here after coming across from Toronto in this a couple of years before this actually. He averaged 12 points only in this year, but he was able to be ranked this highly because steals. He got 2 steals per game for 5 out of 7 seasons in a row. 2.3 in this season with almost 4 assists. Shot horribly, but low volume, under 40%, but 90% from the line, 38% from 3 for Christie. Realistically, his value, though, was tied almost exclusively to his steals numbers. Backup power forward is Vlade Divac. This is the 98-99 season from Divac. after he came across from the Charlotte Hornets. He was the 33rd ranked player in this season. This was a year where he averaged 14 and 10, over 4 assists, a block. So really getting those big rebound numbers, but just chiming in some blocks and some assists and okay steal numbers, gets Divac that role. And then next to him is Brad Miller, the 05-06 season for Miller, where he was the 27th ranked player. He averaged 15 and 8. He hit half a three a game, 0.8 steals, 0.8 blocks. Good free throw guy as well. Nothing really standing out as being overly spectacular, but just a solid fantasy second, third round guy for about 3 or 4 seasons in a row was Brad Miller. The last 3 players on this squad, we've got Kevin Martin, who was an absolute free throw animal, got to the line so many times. This was him from the 06-07 season, his 3rd season in the NBA. He was the 16th ranked player, played 80 games, and after this year, things would start to go off the rails in terms of injuries for Martin, but averaged 20 points. And did it with 84% from the line on 7 attempts. And he would get even bigger than that. He got up to a season, his last year in Sacramento, where he averaged over 10 free throw attempts per game. Really that guy that you could get in mid-rounds in fantasy who really balanced out that free throw percentage for you. Next to him, the absolute definition of a player who was terrible in real life but good at fantasy, Rajon Rondo, the 15-16 season. Now, before the Rondo lovers get on me, Rondo was really good when he was back with Boston, and then he tore his ACL and he wasn't good anymore. And it's a simple fact. And this season in Sacramento is the perfect illustration. Terrible on-court play, really, really good fantasy production. The 25th ranked player this season, 12 points, 6 rebounds, almost 12 assists, and 2 steals. The shooting was rough from the line, 58%. Didn't take many attempts from the field. Shot 37% from 3 on minimal volume, but it's those assists, the strong rebounds, and the strong steals that made him a super valuable fantasy player. And the last guy on this team is Mike Woodson. Yes, the Mike Woodson who we've seen coaching across the NBA. This is the 82-83 season for Woodson when they were the Kansas City Kings. He was the 33rd ranked player in that season, averaging 18 points with 1.7 steals, 51% from the field. But it's really those steals that gets Woodson into the mix to be in this all-time fantasy squad. The last team we're going to look at today is the San Antonio Spurs. Quite a few recognizable names on this team. At point guard, Johnny Moore, the 84-85 season from Johnny Moore, where he was the 7th ranked player. He averaged 13 points, 10 assists and 2.8 steals. So realistically, we're talking about 2 categories that bumped him up, but that was so good. That's how he became a first-round fantasy player. 10 assists, 4.5 rebounds, 2.8 steals. Everything else was sort of okay, but those big numbers really bumped him all the way up to being in this all-time San Antonio Spurs starting point guard. Now, of course, the all-time best point guard for the Spurs is Tony Parker, but he was never as good of a fantasy player as this season that Johnny Moore had. And that is one of those ones. It's the opposite of Rajon Rondo. We know how good Tony Parker was, but it didn't necessarily always translate to fantasy. In fact, his best ever fantasy season was the 36th ranked player. And consequently, I'll get it out of the way now, he doesn't make this team. Tony Parker is not in the best 13 overall seasons from a member of the San Antonio Spurs, which I guess would surprise many. At starting shooting guard, the 79-80 season, George Gervin. This bloke was ridiculous even before this. He had 4 consecutive top 2 finishes in fantasy. He was the 2nd ranked player in 79-80, but prior to that, he was ranked 2nd, ranked 1st, and ranked 2nd. And then after that, he was 10th, 10th, and 10th. Really strong numbers. He averaged 33 points a game. Doesn't really matter what else he did. He averaged 33 points a game. But he also gave us 53% from the field on 25 attempts. He gave us 85% from the line on almost 8 attempts. He actually hit half a 3 in the first season the 3-point line was introduced. So an absolute fantasy monster, as is the next bloke.
I'm a fun guy.
Of course, Kawhi Leonard makes this team. He is the 8th ranked player in the 16-17 season. Kawhi averaged 26 points with 2 threes, 1.8 steals, 49% from the field, 88% from the line, and then this would really be the last season that he played in San Antonio. He played those 9 games the year after that, but this was it for him in San Antonio, and then on to Toronto and on to the Clippers, but he is still absolutely good enough to make this all-time squad as your starting small forward. At power forward, nobody is going to be surprised when I tell you that this is Trey Lyles. No, of course it's not. It's Timmy Duncan, the 01-02 season from Tim Duncan, where he was the number 1 player in fantasy, averaging 26 and 13. 2.5 blocks, 51 and 80%. Interestingly, Duncan's free throw percentage would really drop off after this. He had a season where he shot under 60% from the line just 2 years after this. He was at 80% here. Imagine drafting him going, well, shit, 80%, and then you're down to 60. That is a real kick in the ass if you happen to draft him there. His free throw percentage varied wildly. This one tends to be more of the standout season in terms of the outlier, but he had a year in 12-13 where he shot 82%. Just wild variation in his free throw numbers. Next to him, what a shock, David the Admiral Robinson. The 94-95 season from Robinson, where he was the number one player, much like Timmy Duncan was in his season. In 94-95, Big Dave averaged 28 and 11. He gave you 3.2 blocks, 1.6 steals, 53 and 77% as well. Robinson was a master at fantasy. He was, from the season he entered the NBA, for 7 consecutive seasons, he never finished worse than 6th. Then he had a year where he only played 6 games, that injured season, and then came back and was the 9th ranked player after that. Unbelievable stuff from Robinson throughout his career. So there's your starting 5 for the Spurs. Backup point guard, Mike Dunleavy, the old Mike Dunleavy. This was the 82-83 season. He only played the 1 year in San Antonio, but he was the 21st ranked player here. He averaged just 8 points, but an absolute shit ton of threes. So that's what skews his value. 0.9 threes, which is so many for that era, it's unfathomable. His Z score for that season, 6.11. That is how good that was. Now, he didn't do too much else, but that really skewed it. But gave us 6 assists, gave us a steal, but so many threes that you could almost, not exactly won the category just by having him, but pretty bloody close to it. Next to him, one of the best components or proponents, maybe that's a better word, that is a better word because components is the wrong one. One of the best proponents of getting steals, Alvin Robertson, the 85-86 version of Robertson. He was the 3rd ranked player. 17 points, 6 rebounds, 5.5 assists, but 3.7 steals. He didn't get 3 steals per game once in his career. He got it 4 times. And the only time he was under 2 steals per game was as a rookie when he played 21 minutes. The other 9 seasons of his career, he was at a minimum 2.2 steals per game. Draft him, and you got that steals category pretty much on lockdown. So Alvin Robertson comes in there as our backup shooting guard. Small forward behind Kawhi Leonard, it is Danny Green, the 14-15 season from Green, where he was the 25th ranked player. This was by far his best fantasy season. Only 12 points, but over a block per game, hit 2.4 triples, 4 rebounds, 87 from the line. And he would have a wild drop-off to be only 74% from the line the year after that. His free throw percentage, let's have a look from when he sort of started in San Antonio. 79%, then 85, then 79, then 87, then 74, then 84, then 77, then 84. Just wild swings. And he doesn't take any attempts at all. So that's probably why there's so many wild swings. In fact, for the last 4 years of his career, he's been under 1 free throw attempt per game. That is an astonishingly low number. But the wild variation in his shooting is pretty crazy. He also shot for over 40% from 3 for 4 consecutive seasons, and then had 3 in a row where he shot under 39% from 3. So some changes in his shooting numbers there as well. We already talked about LaMarcus Aldridge earlier. He comes in as a backup power forward from last year's San Antonio Spurs squad, where he was the 18th ranked player, averaging 21 and 9 with 1.3 blocks, but we don't need to talk about him too more. And then at backup center, it's Artis Gilmore, the 82-83 season for Gilmore. He was on the all-time Bull squad. He's also here. In 82-83, he was the 6th ranked player. He averaged 18 and 12 with 2.3 blocks on a massive 63% from the field with a 74% free throw percentage. To round out this rotation, Manu Ginobili. This is the Ginobili from the 07-08 season. For Manu, he was, this I think is the only season that he played over 30 minutes a game. Yes, it was. He was the 18th ranked player in this season. He averaged almost 20 points, over 2 threes, 1.5 steals. Manu comes in there, who was a solid enough, top 30 sort of a guy, but this was the time that he elevated himself into the second round of fantasy discussions. Last year's DeMar DeRozan comes in as well. He was the 26th ranked player in his first season in San Antonio, averaged 21 points with over 6 assists, so really strong numbers there. Gave us 6 rebounds and 48% from the field. And the last player we look at here is Willie Anderson. For the Spurs, this is Willie Anderson in his rookie year, 88-89. He was the 30th ranked player. He got in here because he averaged 1.9 steals, he shot 50%, and he averaged 19 points as a rookie. And things would really go downhill for Anderson after that pretty quickly. But he does find himself on this all-time fantasy squad for the San Antonio Spurs. That'll do it for today's show, guys. Subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, and on YouTube. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review and check out my other podcast, Locked On AFL, as well. We've just launched in the AFL season where we've got our first round done and in the book. So check that out as well. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.